Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Collingstone Network 2023-2024 NHL season preview. So I'm going to hop right into it with my Atlantic Division standings prediction. So coming in last place, the 8th overall team, I have the Montreal Canadiens. I don't necessarily dislike this Canadiens team. I just think they're very far away from being a playoff team. It's kind of crazy that they were in the Cup final only a few years ago. I really hope that Cole Caulfield can play a full season and really show what he's capable of doing with an 82-game slate. But I'm really interested to see what Slavkovsky can do in his second season if he does take that step up, because I think a lot of people are expecting it. So that's kind of why I'd be tuning into the Canadiens games, but otherwise not much going on there in Montreal. I think they're at the bottom of the Atlantic. Coming in 7th in the Atlantic Division, I have the Detroit Red Wings, another team that I feel like is still a few years away. They're building a nice core, but last year they kind of showed to us that they're still rebuilding, and they sold at the deadline, even though maybe they could have made a push for a wild card. I don't think so necessarily. I think Ville Husso is due for a bounce back season. He had a lot of starts last year, a sub 900 save percentage, but didn't play bad by any stretch of the means. I'm really excited to see Dylan Larkin in this situation. Can Mo Seider be a dark horse Norris guy, or at least a guy where you look at him and say he'll win a Norris eventually one day. But yeah, not much to say about Detroit. Coming in 6th in the Atlantic Division, I have the Florida Panthers, and this might be a little bit of a hot take since they just won the East and went to the Stanley Cup Finals. But it's not so much about the Panthers in this situation. It's just the other teams I like more than them. This team we saw is built for playoff hockey. They were able to win 3 series in the East and give Vegas somewhat of a battle. Not really, but this team's built for playoff hockey. Not as much so the regular season. I feel like this team is bound to go on some cold stretches. I don't necessarily trust Bob, even though he just had a great playoff run. Don't necessarily trust him as a main starter throughout the regular season. And I just see a little bit of a Stanley Cup appearance hangover here. And again, it's just the teams ahead of them I like a lot more than them. So yeah, 6th Florida. Coming in number 5 in the Atlantic Division, just missing the playoffs, I have the Ottawa Senators. So Ottawa is a team that some people really like as a dark horse, to get into the playoffs. And I like that. I just feel like they need to show me that they can be a playoff team, and then I'll put them in the playoffs. They still haven't shown that to me yet. Last year, they would have good games where Tim Stützle had an amazing season last year, and so did Brady Tkachuk in terms of point production. However, just the back half, their defense and their goaltending wasn't that good, and it's hard to win every single game 3-4, 5-4, and you're gonna need to win those games 2-1 in the regular season to be a playoff team. I don't necessarily think that Ottawa's there. I do like bringing in Jonas Korpisalo. I think he provides a good stable starter. Say what you want about him, but he did the job in LA, and he's done the job before in Columbus, so I really do like that signing, at least short term. Maybe it becomes a bad contract in a few years. But yeah, I'm really just looking forward to seeing Tim Stützle play another season. He's an absolutely electric player. And then the three-headed monster on the back end with Thomas Chabot, Jacob Chychrun, and Jake Sanderson. I'm excited to see what those 3 guys can provide. And if they all play at an elite level, I think this team can get in the playoffs. But right now I have them just outside. Next, I have in 4th place in the Atlantic Division and the second wild card team, the Buffalo Sabres, making the playoffs for the first time since, I want to say, 2011, 2010, around that range. Unlike Ottawa, Buffalo showed us last season that they could make the playoffs if everything went well for them in the regular season. They didn't, but they are a step ahead of the Senators, and that's why I have them a step ahead of them in this division. I think Devon Levi, if he comes in as an elite goalie, this team could be better than 4th place in the Atlantic. They could be, pushing it there. They could surpass, Tampa, surpass Boston if they have a bad season. I still think the Leafs perform better than Buffalo over the course of a regular season. But yeah, you got your superstar in Tage Thompson and Rasmus Dahlin. I'd say those two have proven enough that they're elite talents at what they do. Owen Power, is he going to take another step up? They have just so many guys that if they have 1 or 2 of them, like a Jack Quinn or a Casey Middlestat, to take, a little bit, Peyton Krebs, just a little bit of a step up, it's going to help the team a lot. We saw Dylan Cousins do it last season, and the team catapulted into a 90. I think they had like 93 points in the regular season, which is crazy. But I really like what Buffalo's building there. I think they're going to have one of the most exciting offenses, one of the best power plays. But we'll see. I have them in the second wild card, and I think Rasmus Dahlin, if this Sabres team does make the playoffs, is going to make a really good case for a North season. Third place in the Atlantic Division, I have the Boston Bruins. They set the record for points in a regular season last year and wins. They had like 65 wins, I want to say, which is absolutely insane. I think losing Bergeron and Krejci is going to affect this team that much. They also lost Bertuzzi, Taylor Hall, Dmitry Orlov, who was on the back end after the trade deadline. So I think even though I have Boston making the playoffs and being that third place team in the Atlantic Division, I think they could set the record for biggest, decline in points from one season to the next. I'm not sure what the record is now, but because they had so many points in the regular season last year, if they finish this year with 80 to 90, it's going to be a big drop off. And I just think that hole that is left without Patrice Bergeron is going to really affect this team. I still think they're solid enough to be a playoff team. I just don't, see this team being as scary as they were last year. And we see this a lot where teams, I'm going to throw out a football comparison, but look at the New England Patriots. Since Tom Brady has left, they've really lost their identity, and it does take some time for teams when they have just such a stable guy in a certain position. Once they lose them, like a Patrice Bergeron, it takes a while to, finally fill that void. So I got Boston in third. Coming in second in the Atlantic Division, I have the Toronto Maple Leafs. I could have them in first, but they haven't won the division since, 2000. I remember I had it written down on my sheet last year when I talked about the Leafs, but, they haven't won the division in a while, and they go through some cold stretches. I really think, I really like this Leafs team. I think they're going to be really solid. Probably, in considering points, they'll be a top 3 team in the East, I'd say, with Tampa, who I have ahead of them, and then the winner in the Metro. But I really like what Toronto's building. I like that they were able to get that, Matthews contract re-signed. They don't have to have that lingering the whole season. Instead, it's going to be the Nylander contract situation, and who knows, maybe he gets that signed, by the time you're even seeing this video. Probably not, but I think he's due for a big year just because he's going to be trying to get that contract. So I think the offense is going to be, firing at all cylinders. It's just goaltending. Is it going to be Wall? Is it going to be Samsonov? Is it Martin Jones going to have to play? There's just some questions around the Leafs where I can't have them as a division winner, but still a really good team in this Atlantic Division. And coming in first place, I have the Tampa Bay Lightning. Tampa Bay just had the longest off season that they've had in 4 years. They made 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals the years prior, and last year they had a first round exit. So a lot more time to just relax and recoup for this season. And I really think Tampa is going to be hungry, and that first round loss is they're going to take it personally, and they're going to really want to have a really good regular season and get that home ice in at least the Atlantic Division and perhaps throughout the Eastern Conference. But I really like Tampa's roster, and I really like what they did in the bottom 6. That was always the issues with their team prior to when they won the cup, and then they had a great bottom 6 when they won the cup, and then just because those players perform, Blake Coleman, Barclay Goodrow, they go elsewhere, they get those contracts elsewhere. You can't afford to pay everyone, but they brought in pieces like Tyler Mott, Nick Paul is another solid guy. So I just really like this team top to bottom. And Victor Hedman had a bit of a down year last year, but Sergachev had an amazing year. So if they can have both of those defensemen playing at an elite level, I really think that benefits them. They will be losing Vasilevsky for the first bit of the season, but I think when he comes back, he's going to be playing at a Vezina level, just because, again, this offseason, that little bit of rest is actually going to really go a long way, I think, for Tampa. And I have them coming out on top in the Atlantic Division. The next division I'm going to be running through is the Metropolitan Division. Kind of an interesting division top to bottom, but I feel like there's a clear these teams can make the playoffs, and there's a clear these teams don't have a chance to make the playoffs. So let's start with number 8. I have the Philadelphia Flyers. I really don't have any expectations for this team to win any games. I don't think they want to win any games. I really like what they did at the draft, being the team that got Michkov. Seems like he'll be the face of the franchise when he does come over from Russia, and he's going to be, honestly, the best player the Flyers have had in a while, probably since prime Claude Giroux. But yeah, I don't think this Flyers team is going to win a ton of games. You just want to see growth from the young guys, and yeah, just maybe some overperformers from maybe veteran guys that you can move off at the deadline. But again, I don't think the Flyers are going to win many games this year, so I have them in last. 7th in the Metro Division, I have the Washington Capitals. Sorry, Ovi. I will be, tuning in from time to time to see if, you're going to break that goal record, just to see you score goals along the way. It's always a treat. The fact that we still get to watch Alex Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby, we can't take it for granted. But it's more so I'll see the highlights when they show up on my, Instagram feed rather than tuning in to Washington games, because I don't think they're going to be very fun either. John Carlson struggled with injury a lot of last year, so maybe a fully healthy year of him changes things. I really like them bringing in Rasmus Sandin from the Leafs last year. I think he's due to sort of make a name for himself, this season. But yeah, just the offense depth is a little lackluster, and I don't know. I don't really believe in this Washington team. Coming in 6th place, I have the controversial Columbus Blue Jackets, and I only say controversial because of what happened in the preseason and everything that went down with Mike Babcock. But I truly do believe the quote. I think it was Boone Jenner who said that, all that has just brought the team closer together, and I really do believe, because, a lot of the players, they were there longer than Babcock was, so, just a weird situation like that can kind of bond guys in a weird way, just because they kind of all went through it. I'm really, really excited to see Adam Fantilli. I hope he's on their day one roster. I'm pretty sure he is, and slot him between Gaudreau and Laine and just see that line rip it up. I really believe if, Laine, he's not going to stay healthy the whole year. That's just the kind of player he is, but who's to say with Gaudreau and Fantilli, he can't hit his ceiling and get back to that, obviously not as good as Austin Matthews back when he was a rookie and there was, debate between the two of them, but back to at least being a star or an all-star in this league. I really like what they did on the blue line, bringing in Provorov, bringing in Severson, and then, Werenski will be back, hopefully healthy for the full season this year. So I'm excited to watch Columbus this year. I actually will tune into games, and I think they want to get back to that identity, just built from the back end, have a really strong decor, and try to hold the other team to as little goals as they can, and hope that, some of the pieces that they have now, like a Fantilli or like a Kent Johnson, can really break through as offensive threats. Coming in 5th in the Metro, I have the New York Islanders. Other than Ilya Sorokin, this team doesn't really have like a star player. Matt Barzal is an amazing skater, but he is, a complimentary player in the sense that I really think he needs another elite player for him to hit his ceiling. I don't think he's necessarily like will carry a team, and we've seen that, back when Tavares was on the team, he was the Calder, and he was over a point per game in his rookie season, and he's hasn't gotten back to that point yet. But maybe with Bo Horvat, they show a little bit of chemistry over the course of a full season. I think if you're an Islanders fan, you just want that Bo Horvat contract to not look bad by season's end. It's going to be tough just because of the length of it. But the contracts I do like is them, keeping Sorokin, keeping Varlamov. So again, a solid team, but just missing the playoffs. I just don't think their offense is going to be good enough, and there's too many good teams in the East this year. Coming in 4th, and they're my first wildcard team, is the New York Rangers. I could see them missing the playoffs. Just the way they played in the second half of the year last year really disappointed me, especially after they brought in Patrick Kane, brought in Tarasenko. Everybody thought that they were going to be the Cup favorite from that point on, but we never really saw that team, and a disappointing first-round exit to the New Jersey Devils leaves a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth. So I don't know how to feel about this team. If Igor can have a Vezina-like season, I think they could win the Metro. I'm just betting on them to be, up and down throughout the season, but still playoff team. I just like the 3 other teams that I still have ahead of them. And yeah, we'll see what the Rangers bring to the table, but still a solid team. Just I don't know exactly where to place them. Coming in 3rd, probably the team that I'm most excited to watch this season, just because if you had told me in 2017 when the Ottawa Senators almost single-handedly, carried by Erik Karlsson, beat the Pittsburgh Penguins. They almost beat the Pittsburgh Penguins. They didn't. They lost that Game 7 OT. Oh, Chris Kunitz. Still have nightmares about it. But yeah, now Crosby and Erik Karlsson, especially after the season he had last year, not like, 2 years ago Erik Karlsson where whatever. He still has shown that he has that it factor, and I'm really excited to see, how those two what the chemistry is like. They're going to produce a lot of highlight reel, goals. I'm sure of it. I think Crosby is motivated more than he's ever been, just because, he won the cup early in his career and then took a few years off, from winning the cup, and then got back there, but then, missing the playoffs for the first time in a while. I don't know if it's definitely not the first time in his career. Probably in his rookie season they didn't make it, but first time in a while Pittsburgh was outside of the playoffs, so I don't have them missing it a second straight year. I think the team is motivated. I like them bringing in Ned as a backup goalie to Tristan Jarry. I think that's a really underrated tandem, and yeah, I think Pittsburgh is good enough to be a top 3 seed in a really tough division. Coming in at number 2, I have the New Jersey Devils, and a big reason for that is just the 1-2 punch of Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier. When they took Nico Hischier first overall, I think there was expectations that maybe he could lead the franchise, be that, do-it-all guy. But now that they have a guy like Jack Hughes, who I'm not sure if he hit 100 points last season, but expecting him to be a 100-point, around 50 goal kind of guy for the foreseeable future. Nico's able to take a step back, just be that two-way guy, be the captain of the team essentially, and I just really like what they're building. They also have so many offensive threats like Dawson Mercer, who had a really good year last year. Timo Meier, I'm really excited to see for a full season in New Jersey. Jesper Bratt, good as always. And then, Tyler Toffoli, a really underrated move. I think not a lot of people are talking about it. I think he could hit 40 goals on this Devils team. I think the question marks, if there are any, are just on the back end. But last year, they proved to me that they can hang with the big dogs, and Vanacek, had a really good season as a starter. Schmid stepped in when he needed to, so a decent tandem, and I just like the way Lindy Ruff has this team playing. I have them second in the Metro. And last but not least, obviously not least, because the first place team I have in the Metropolitan Division is the Carolina Hurricanes. And I just, maybe it's because of all the teams in this division, this is the team that 100% I know will be a top 3 seed. I don't think they're a middling wildcard team. I don't think they miss the playoffs. I'm really high on Carolina. I'm looking at Seth Jarvis as a, sort of breakout candidate. He's obviously shown flashes, but I think this year he could really, step up. I think Svetch is missing part of the season due to that ACL tear. So they're going to need someone to step up and score goals at a consistent level for them. And I'm really looking at Seth Jarvis to have a kind of, step into, the spotlight kind of season. I like their goaltending. I think they have 3 really capable guys with Piotr Kochev, Antti Ranta, and Frederick Anderson. I think on any given night they have a solid guy in there, and then obviously a stud defensive core to protect them. I like the way that Rod Brindamore brings the intensity, and it feels like this team is never you never watch a Hurricanes game and they don't bring it. I feel like, at least from the games I've seen, it always seems like they're in it, motivated, and have a game plan to win. So I think over the course of the regular season, they're going to be the most consistent team in this Metro, and the most consistent team overall in the East. I think they're going to be the number 1 seed in the East, the best division winner heading into the playoffs. So high expectations for Carolina this year. Moving on to the Western Conference, I'm going to start with the Pacific Division, the division of my Edmonton Oilers. This is a really interesting division. I feel like similar to the Metro, where there's the clear, these aren't playoff teams, and then kind of like a middle area, and then the top teams that you expect to be there. So coming in last, I have the San Jose Sharks. This San Jose team does not have a lot going for it. I think by trading Erik Karlsson, they kind of have committed to not being that great. It was a quote from Greer, the GM, Mike Greer, saying, Logan Couture and Thomas Hertl, like, if they want out, they can get out. But I'm sure they love San Jose. But maybe some frustration late in the season provides them to be, guys they can sell at the deadline. I just don't have expectations for the San Jose team. I think they might be exciting. They might score more than we think, but I don't think, they're built strong enough on the back end to, make any noise in this division. 7th in the Pacific Division, I have the Anaheim Ducks. I have them similar to where I have the San Jose Sharks. They're just, they have some pieces working. I'm not as high on Zegras as a lot of people are. I think he's a great highlight reel guy, but I got the chance to see him live actually last year, and just, I don't know, unless he's scoring goals or anything like that, his impact on the ice is very limited. So I'm not surprised whatsoever about the contract situation that they went through this offseason, because if I'm the Anaheim Ducks GM, I don't think, he's really done enough to deserve a long-term contract. So I think the bridge deal is pretty ideal there. John Gibson, will he finish the season in Anaheim? That's to be determined. But yeah, I just, not a lot of reasons for me to be excited about this Anaheim team. Shout out to Troy Terry for getting his deal. I think he earned that last season. But yeah, I think you're just looking for growth from the young guys and, not really much expectation for this team. Coming in 6th in the Pacific Division, I have the Calgary Flames, and they didn't blow things up as much as I thought they were going to. I thought, everybody was going to be gone, but they really only traded away Tyler Toffoli, and they kept Noah Hannafin. If they have a poor season, I think a lot of guys are going to be wanting their way out by the halfway point, but they got Daryl Sutter out of there. I think that was their issue last season. I think the team just wasn't built for Daryl Sutter to be the leader of that team, but I think Huberdeau is going to want to bounce back. I think Kadri's going to want to have a big season. He's going to be in Calgary for the foreseeable future. He signed a relatively long-term contract. I like Backlund as the decision to make captain. He's been there a while, and he re-signed. Jacob Markstrom, bit of an X factor because he can play at a Vezina level. We've seen him play as one of the best goalies in the league, but if he starts to play pretty poorly, look for Wolf, the rookie who stepped in a few games last year, but look for him to potentially take over that starting role by season's end. I still have them missing the playoffs. I don't trust them enough to go back in the playoffs, but Calgary's very every other year, so who knows, they could easily win this division for all that matter. Coming in 5th in the Pacific Division and making the playoffs as the second wildcard team, I have the Vancouver Canucks. I really like this Canucks team heading into next season. I think with Rick Tocchet as their head coach last year, they had a winning record. I think Elias Peterson is a dark horse MVP candidate. I don't think if they're a second wildcard tier or second wildcard team that he wins the Hart Trophy, but I think there's a scenario where he could be 100 plus points like he was last year. The Canucks get back into the playoffs, and the media kind of rides with it. I think Quinn Hughes is an elite offensive talent on the blue line, and I liked, they brought in Ronick at the deadline last season. I like him, as more of a stable guy on that back end. I still do have a lot of questions when it comes to their defense, but I really like Thatcher Demko. I think he's due for a bounce back season. Vancouver's goaltending was just terrible last season. Everybody was sub like 8.95, so they really want to shore that up. But yeah, they got him. They got Casey DeSmith as a backup, who I really like. I think he's really solid. And then yeah, just the pieces up front. Kuzmenko was one of my favorite guys to watch last season. He had 30 plus goals, I'm pretty sure. So look for him to be a little bit of a sleeper candidate in a fantasy league. You can probably get him at a good value. But yeah, I really like the Canucks this season, and I think with a full year of Tocchet, I think he could be a chance to be that Jack Adams, that coach of the year. But yeah, I'm going with Vancouver making the playoffs and being the 5th seed in the Pacific Division. Coming in 4th in the Pacific Division, I have the third-year team Seattle Kraken, who last year proved to everybody that 4 solid lines goes a long way, and they really have scoring depth. Look for Matty Beniers, the Calder winner from last year, to potentially become a star this year. I think last year he showed flashes, obviously, but his point production, he wasn't a point per game or anything like that. I think he could be at that level this year. Jared McCann could score 40 goals again. I just really like kind of what they've built, and now I trust them enough to pick them to make the playoffs. The West is kind of weak outside the top 5 or 6 teams, but yeah, I'm really liking the Kraken heading into this year. One thing though is they did get surprisingly good goaltending last year out of Martin Jones and Philip Grubauer. They obviously lost Martin Jones. They still have Grubauer. So if that doesn't stay consistent, perhaps they fall out of the playoffs. But they beat Colorado, and they took Dallas to 7. So I think they're a legit team, and I think they're a tough play, and I think they're good enough to make the playoffs. Coming in 3rd in the Pacific Division, I have the LA Kings, and I was tempted to put them higher because I'm really strong, really high on them. Being an Oilers fan, I've seen them in the playoffs 2 years in a row, and a very underrated team. A lot of people don't know how good LA actually is. I like the Dubois move, bringing in a guy, just because they had so much depth on forward, they could afford to, send Winnipeg 3, roster players for a Pierre-Luc Dubois type guy. I think you look for him to probably be the first line center, just as a scoring threat. And then Anze Kopitar. I think now that Patrice Bergeron's out of the league, I think Anze Kopitar, you got Alexander Barkov, obviously, Ryan O'Reilly, but I'm looking at Kopitar to just take over as that guy who's, just expected to win the Selke at this point. Great two-way guy and great offensive threat as well. But his faceoff percentage is good, just a great leader on that team. The blue line is solid. I think goaltending is the only question mark, but they got things done last year with Phoenix, Copley, and Jonas Korpisalo. So they got Copley again, and they got Cam Talbot in the offseason. So, if they perform poorly, maybe they're outside of the playoffs. But again, they're a really solid team, and I think LA, everybody needs to be, putting them on notice. They had a 100-point season. They had a 100-point season last year, and they could have very well, if a few bounces didn't go Edmonton's way, if Edmonton didn't make, that 3-0 comeback in game 4, they would have been up 3-1 in that series, and it would have been a completely different series. And who knows what LA would have done against Vegas. But that's the team I have second in the Pacific Division. I have the Vegas Golden Knights. Yes, the Stanley Cup champions from last season don't win their division. And no bias as an Oilers fan. When I get to them, I'll talk about why I'm so high on them. But Vegas, a really tough play just because their defense makes it so easy for their goalies. I don't think Adin Hill is worth the money that he was given. I think it's kind of like a San Francisco 49ers QB room where not anybody, but Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, can come in and succeed. I think Adin Hill and Logan Thompson is a good tandem, and they'll get the job done enough to be a solid playoff team. Jack Eichel had a solid season last year. Mark Stone has always struggled with injuries, so I can't expect him to play a full season. And again, going back to my Leafs take, I really like Vegas. I really like the Leafs. I just think the team that I have ahead of them, I have more confidence that they'll win the division. And that means first in the Pacific Division, I have the Edmonton Oilers. Yes, my favorite team, but they have the arguably two best players in the entire NHL in Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And if you ask me, I'd probably say when they're both on, they're two of the best. Connor McDavid, obviously the best player. Leon Draisaitl, you can argue a few guys over him, but his impact is just as important. And some people don't know this because last year we played them a lot together in the playoffs, just because that's kind of how that's what it comes down to, I guess. They like to pair them together just because they're so threatening when they're on the same line. But for all of last season, McDavid was the first line center and Draisaitl was the second line center. That's why Nuge was able to have 100 points. That's why Zach Hyman was able to have such a great step into stardom type season. But the X factor for this team, I'm really looking forward to seeing Matthias Ekholm on this team for a full season. Since we got Matthias Ekholm at the trade deadline last year, we were the best team in the NHL, points percentage wise. So I think winning the Pacific Division is not out of the realm of possibilities. I think Stuart Skinner, carries on from his impressive play last year, and I think Jack Campbell is going to be a better backup this year than he was last year, and maybe he even takes the starting role if Stuart Skinner struggles a little bit. And then Evan Bouchard, I'm really excited to see him be that power play quarterback for the entire season. I think if you can get, him in the 5th round, that's worth it. I think Evan Bouchard potentially has the chance to lead defensemen in points this season, lead in power play points, leading goals. I'm really looking forward to watching Oilers games this year, and I have them first in the division. Now we have the Central Division, the last division for my predictions, and coming in 8th in the Central Division, I have the Chicago Blackhawks. About a month ago, I was starting to talk myself into this Chicago team, maybe even able to do more than we expect, because what if Bedard is a superstar right away? But then I thought back to the Oilers in 2017 and 2019 and remembered, oh yeah, we had the best player in the league, and that didn't matter because the rest of the team was doo-doo. And that's the way I look at the Chicago team. I think they're going to be a tough play, and a lot of people are going to underestimate them. They are going to win some games, but I can't really justify this team being out of the basement of the NHL. They were obviously the team that landed the number 1 overall pick last year. I'm really excited to see Bedard plus Taylor Hall. I really like that move, and I like bringing in, Foligno and Perry, just some veterans to just kind of make this forward core make a little bit more sense, because I don't know if you checked their lines much last year or watched a lot of Chicago games, but there were a lot of who and what, like that guy is an NHL player. And yeah, they don't really have a starting goalie. I think Peter Mrazek is that guy right now. Not 100% sure on that, but just so many question marks. I think it'll be a fun, exciting season. I think they'll win games. I think Bedard is going to be the best rookie, but I still have them as the last place team in the Central Division. Coming in at 7th in the Central Division, I think it's potential that there's a large gap between this team and the 8th place team, depending on how well of a season they have. But the Arizona Coyotes, I think they're a team that a lot of people aren't looking at as a team that has the chance to maybe make a push for a wild card spot. I just think, like right now, my second wild card in the West is Vancouver, and the teams I have missing, are just teams. It's just there's a whole middle area where who knows, Arizona could be that team that emerges from the pack. But I really like Clayton Keller as a number 1 scoring option. Him, Schmaltz, and Barrett Hayton was a very, very good first line last year. I think bringing in Logan Cooley is going to help. I like bringing in Matt Dumba and Sean Durzi on the blue line. I think those were very underrated moves. And I just like the way Arizona plays. They were a tough team last year, like very underratedly tough team to play. So I'm expecting Arizona to, win a lot more games than people are expecting. And yeah, I have them 7th in the Central Division. Coming in 6th in the Central Division, I have the St. Louis Blues. I'm not so high on this team. Last year, it seemed like they were kind of starting to retool. And, they got rid of guys like Ryan O'Reilly. So maybe this year is going to be more of the same, and they'll start to sell some of those guys at the deadline. But this year, I'm just really looking at Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas to be, the faces of the franchise, really, at least when it comes to their scoring. But yeah, St. Louis, I don't know. They struggle with injury. They're just not a team that jumps off the page to me. But who knows? Maybe they push for a wild card. Maybe they push for a top 3 seed in this division. I don't know where to put them, and I'm not so high on them. Not really high on Binnington either. They should have kept Ville Husso. But yeah, St. Louis in 6th. Coming in 5th in the Central Division, I have the Nashville Predators. I really like what they did in this offseason, bringing in Ryan O'Reilly, and just kind of, being a team that's going to be a solid defensive team, going to be a hard team to play just because, UC Saros, Roman Josi, Ryan McDonough, Ryan O'Reilly, those are just guys that are going to make it tough in their own end. I just don't think they really have enough scoring to make the playoffs or be an elite team. They, who knows, if Roman Josi didn't miss the last 20 games of the season last year, they probably make that, second wild card over Winnipeg, just because Winnipeg was struggling at the end of the year. But I don't like this team enough to pick them in the playoffs yet. It wouldn't surprise me if they made the playoffs, but again, I just don't trust their forwards enough. If you go on Daily Faceoff and look at their offensive lines, it might be a tough season for Nashville, and it might be you're 2 months into the season and realize that, okay, we're not competitive at all, and maybe you start to look at moving a guy like Philip Forsberg. But yeah, Nashville in 5th. 4th place in the Central Division, but not making the playoffs, I have the Winnipeg Jets. This is a difficult pick for me to make because they could very well have a poor first 2 months of the season, trade Scheifele, trade Hellebuck, and be last in the Central Division. But I don't think they're going to do that. I like the way Rick Bowness has this team playing, especially at the first half of the season last year. They really looked like, they were reaching their potential. But, second half of the season, kind of things started to fall apart. I do really like the return they got in the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade. Gabe Vilardi himself could, be just as good as Pierre-Luc Dubois in a few years' time. And then Rasmus Kupari, another underrated piece, and Alex Iafallo, another underrated piece. So I think their forwards are, very overlooked, and they have 4 really solid scoring lines. You look at Scheifele and Kyle Connor at the top, but, I like the other pieces as well. Josh Morrissey has, proven himself now to be a borderline elite defenseman. I didn't really see it that much until the Oilers played the Jets back in the 2021 season. And yeah, Josh Morrissey just looked really, really good in that playoff series where the Jets swept the Oilers. So I believe in them there. But I do think there's a scenario where Winnipeg kind of blows things up. But right now, I have them as a solid team and the team that I trust fourth best, I guess, in the Central Division. Coming in third in the Central Division, I have the Minnesota Wild. Just a really solid team. They've got two capable goalies in Gustafsson and Marc-Andre Fleury. I think Matthew Boldy is going to take another step forward. I think Joel Eriksson Ek could potentially take another step forward. And then Kaprizov was, I think he played 65 or 70 games last year, so you're hoping to get all 82 out of him. Matt Zuccarello re-upped for another 2 years, so they've kind of got their core there on offense, and then, solid on defense as well. I just think this is another team that's a very underrated regular season team. They find ways to win games, and they find ways to, be there in the standings. So I can't justify putting them anything lower than third in this division. So yeah, Minnesota third. Second in the Central Division, I have the Colorado Avalanche. They were second in the Central Division last year, and that was, they were first in the Central Division last year, and that was with Georgiev playing absolutely out of his mind. Do I think he does that again? Probably not. I think he's probably a little more down to earth, falls back down to earth a little bit. But last year they experienced a lot of injury, like Makar missed some time, McKinnon missed some time, obviously Landeskog missed time, and he's going to be out all regular season again this year, and that's why I just can't have them in first place in this division. I think they're probably going to have some tough stretches, but again, a really solid team, and I just like the team that I have ahead of them a little bit more, just as a more complete team. But again, Colorado is one of the league's elite teams, and they're going to be in every game. I think McKinnon's going to have an incredible season. I think Rantanen's going to have another great complimentary season. Makar, good challenge for the Norris. So yeah, I just have them second in the division. First place in the Central Division, and actually my President's Trophy winners, I have the Dallas Stars. I really like what Dallas did in this offseason, bringing in Matt Duchene, just really shoring up that center depth. And last year, they were looking like the team that was going to win the Central Division, maybe even be the President's Trophy winners through the first half of the season. They struggled a little more in the second half of the season. But this is another team I got the privilege of watching live. I can tell you that J-Rob is the real deal. Pavelski's a great complimentary player. Rupe Hintz as well. They just got so many guys where, they can score goals, and, a very underrated team when it comes to that. And then, what happens when you're not scoring goals? You have Jake Ottinger in net, who I think is due for a really big regular season. Miro Heiskanen is a elite number one defenseman. I think he's in the Norris conversation this year. Could potentially win it, especially if they are the President's Trophy winners. But yeah, I really like what I'm seeing from Dallas. And I think Tyler Seguin, he's, kind of came back a little bit. He's been good in the playoffs, especially in the bubble, but he hasn't really had regular season success in a few years, so I'm expecting him to kind of step up a little bit. Think about Jamie Benn, who had a really good regular season last year, and people probably wrote him off a little bit as a point producer, so I'm hoping for Seguin to have a little bit of the same, rebirth. It's always tough to pick the playoffs right at the start of the season, because unless I got every single division right, these aren't going to be the exact teams, the exact matchups, and then obviously there's injuries that happen and different implications that will affect these series. But as far as the rosters I know, here are my playoff predictions. So starting off with the 1 seed in the East, I've got the Carolina Hurricanes facing the 8 seed, second wild card, Buffalo Sabres. So this will be a really fun series, but I think the Carolina Hurricanes are going to make quick work of the Sabres. They just have that playoff experience. I think Buffalo's just happy to be there in the playoffs. It could be a close series in terms of the games, but I've got Carolina getting the job done in 5. Next, we have the New Jersey Devils playing against the Pittsburgh Penguins. This is a series that, I'd probably tune into every single game. And again, I'm going to go with the experience here. Give me Pittsburgh in 7. I just think Sidney Crosby versus Jack Hughes, that'll be a good matchup. But I feel like they'll be able to neutralize that and kind of do what we saw Carolina do against New Jersey this year in the playoffs. Next, I have Tampa Bay facing the Rangers. So these teams are used to seeing each other in the Eastern Conference Finals, but they have a matchup here in the first round, and I think it'll be a good, hard-fought series, but give me Tampa Bay in 6. And then we have Toronto versus Boston, the tale as old as time. If this series goes to 7 games, give me Boston, but I've got Toronto getting it done in 6, finally exercising their demons and beating the team of the past. But they weren't able to get it done when Bergeron was there, but luckily for them, he's retired now. Moving on to the West, I'll start with the Dallas Stars, my 1 seed in the West, facing the second wild card Canucks. Again, the Canucks are just going to be happy to be here. I think they're overmatched in this series, but I think they can make things interesting. And depending on how well Thatcher Demko's playing, they could maybe even pull off an upset. But give me Dallas in 6 in that one. And then that leaves Colorado and Minnesota as the other 2 teams in the Central Division. Minnesota, I just feel so bad for them because they've played tough teams in the first round year after year after year. And once again, they're not going to be able to get that first round win. Give me Colorado in 6. Colorado, after the first round exit from this season, is probably, hungrier than ever. They might have Landeskog back at this point in time. Hopefully they're healthy around this time of the year. I just think that they're going to beat Minnesota. And then I have Edmonton versus Seattle. I don't want to, fall into what Colorado did last year and underestimate Seattle and lose in 7. But I think Edmonton, they're just the better team in maybe every facet here. Like maybe they have worse forward depth, but they have Connor McDavid, and no one on Seattle is going to be able to score, like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl will. So give me Edmonton in 6. And then Vegas versus LA. So this was actually Vegas's first ever series. They swept the Kings way back in 2018, but a little bit of a different result here. I've got the LA Kings upsetting the defending champions in 7. So I've got LA beating Vegas in 7. I just think LA is a tough team in a 7-game series. Trust me, I've seen it 2 years in a row as an Oilers fan. And then, who knows what the health at this point of time will be for Vegas, and I just like what LA's building, and I think they match up very well against Vegas, so give me the Kings in 7. Now moving on to the second round, going back to the East, I've got Carolina and Pittsburgh, and this is a very, very tough matchup to predict just because, Erik Karlsson plus Crosby, that might be too good, and especially in the playoffs, like in a single game, like who knows what they can do. But Carolina is just so well built. I'm going to have to take them in this series. Give me Carolina in 7. And then I have Tampa and Toronto. I'm just going to do the reverse of this year's matchup. Give me Tampa in 6. Again, I'm pretty high on Tampa this year as they've gotten that, full proper off-season's rest. And I think, not winning the cup last year, not making it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals is going to motivate them. And, they've got big expectations, and I have big expectations for them this season. Next, we have Dallas versus Colorado. This is a very tough matchup because the last time we saw this, I think, was in the bubble. And Dallas won in 7. That was the Joel Kiviranta, OT winner. And I don't think, Kiviranta is not. I think Kiviranta signed with Colorado, actually. So he's not on Dallas, but whoever that OT hero is, or whoever that hero is, it's going to happen in Game 7 again. And I've got Dallas beating Colorado in 7. I think they've got the better goalie, better defense. Maybe not better defense, but just I trust them to shut down Colorado more than I trust Colorado to shut down Dallas. And, obviously Colorado has the better offense, but it's not by much. And then I've got Edmonton facing LA for the 3rd year in a row. And if this matchup happens again, which it probably will just because the Pacific Division is tight and tough, I will be shaking. However, the Oilers will quickly prove to me that you had no reason to worry. Oilers in 5. They are a different team this season, a different beast, and they're not even going to let it go to 6 or 7 with LA. So that sets up my Eastern Conference Finals between Carolina and Tampa Bay. They played each other in 2021 in the second round. Tampa swept Carolina, I'm pretty sure. But I have a different result here. I got Carolina in 6. Again, I really like Tampa, and I think they have a chance to win, the East for the 4th time in 5 years, which is absolutely insane. But Carolina's been so close so many times, and I think this is the year they finally get it done. And then I have Edmonton versus Dallas in the Western Conference Finals. I'm not taking the Oilers to lose this series, thank you very much. Setting up a 2006 Stanley Cup Finals rematch. I got the Edmonton Oilers. I have Edmonton beating Dallas in 6, and then I have Carolina Edmonton in the Stanley Cup Finals. And in a hard-fought 7-game series on the road in Game 7, Connor McDavid wins his first Stanley Cup. And this isn't bias. Like, this team is just, it has all the pieces that they need in order to compete. I really, really like Matthias Ekholm. I think Evan Bouchard proved to us in the playoffs last year that he could be elite. I think this upcoming season, he is elite. And I really think it's just solid goaltending play for 4 rounds of the playoffs is going to be the difference maker. And I hope we get it, and apparently I think we get it. So Edmonton Oilers, first cup in Canada since 1993, first Oilers Cup since 1990, I want to say. But yeah, first of my lifetime, and yeah, they avenge the Oilers team from 2006. Now for my awards this upcoming season. Some of these I feel like are just written in stone. Like, for example, my Hart winner is Connor McDavid. I think if the Oilers are a solid team and make the playoffs and he leads the league in points, it's tough not to give it to him unless there's just an incredible story somewhere else in the league. I just don't see that happening. Give me Connor McDavid. For dark horse candidates or for other candidates that I like Sidney Crosby potentially if the Penguins have a really, really good season. Jack Hughes if the Devils have a really, really good season. And I also, as I mentioned before, like Elias Pettersson as a really good dark horse candidate. For the Calder, give me Connor Bedard. I think it's the year of Connor. I think Bedard takes the Calder. McDavid wins pretty much everything else. But yeah, Connor Bedard, most highly touted rookie maybe ever in the NHL. I don't remember, obviously social media was different back then, but I don't remember this much hype about Connor McDavid. Just everything surrounding Bedard feels like he's going to be the next superstar in the league, and I think he could be, superstar as early as year 1. We saw McDavid, if he didn't get injured in his rookie season, he was going to finish a point per game, and who knows, maybe he turned it up in the second half of the season and was a 90 to 100 point player. We never got to see that full rookie season, unfortunately, but hopefully we get a full season of Bedard, and I think he's going to kill it. My James Norris winner is Rasmus Dahlin. I think last year he was, right in it and probably could have won the award if the Sabres made the playoffs. But, the Sabres didn't make the playoffs. However, this year, according to my predictions, they do make the playoffs. So in that case, give Rasmus Dahlin the Norris Trophy because he is incredible. Watch a Sabres game, watch Rasmus Dahlin, and you'll see why he was the number 1 overall pick in his draft class. The Vezina, I have Jake Ottinger winning this. I think the Dallas Stars are just going to be a really, really tough team to play. I think his numbers are going to be outstanding. And again, they're the President's Trophy winners in my eyes. So that means Jake Ottinger's probably getting 40 plus wins. And I think, unless Linus Ullmark does what he did last year, which was absolutely crazy, I think a guy like Jake Ottinger is, primed to come through and win the first Vezina of his career. The Maurice Richard, I think I had this written down before the contract was signed, and a little bit of implication was to do with the fact that it was a contract year, but still, Austin Matthews is the best goal scorer in the league. I think actually I would take McDavid, but McDavid last year seemed like he was really going for it, and I think this year Matthews is going to really go for it and put himself back in that category. For the Selke, I mentioned when I talked about the Kings, I think this is Kopitar's award now that Bergeron's out of the league. So I just think, and especially now that they got a guy like Pierre-Luc Dubois, he's not going to have to do as much offensively. So I think he's just going to be a really, really good shutdown guy. And yeah, give me Anze Kopitar. Another guy that I kind of mentioned potentially winning this award for the Jack Adams, the best coach in the NHL, I have Rick Tocchet. I think if Vancouver makes the playoffs, I think Rick Tocchet is the guy that you point at and say that's the reason why, because they've had this amount of talent before in years prior, but they just haven't had the right coach, and I think Rick Tocchet is that guy, so I have him winning the Jack Adams, and then I have the Oilers winning the Cup. So the Conn Smythe, of course, is going to Connor McDavid, unless Leon Draisaitl severely outplays him in that series, which I don't see happening. I do see happening. Draisaitl's outplayed Connor before, but I think if the Oilers are in the Stanley Cup Finals, Connor McDavid is not going to waste his opportunity to not win the Stanley Cup. And I think in a 7-game series, which I have it going, like McDavid might have like 20 points against Carolina. So give Connor McDavid the Conn Smythe. I, myself, as well as Curtis, I know I'm looking forward to this NHL season a lot. I'm really anticipating this year to be a really good one. I'm really excited for all the storylines. I think the NHL regular season hasn't maybe hit as much in the last few years because, well, one, there was a few years where fans were, in and out of the buildings. So now we have fans back for sure. We've had that for, a couple seasons now. But I think the fact that there's going to be a really, really fun Calder race this year between, Cooley and Bedard and Fantilli, I think the fact that rookies are going to be, putting teams on the map, I think this is going to be, a really exciting season. So yeah, I'm really excited to cover it throughout the year, and thanks for watching.